Imagine needing an answer to a question and having to travel to a library, hope the right book exists, and spend hours searching through indexes. Imagine wanting to share an idea with someone across the world and waiting weeks for letters to arrive. Imagine talented people with brilliant solutions living in isolation, never knowing that someone halfway around the globe is working on the same problem. For most of history, knowledge was isolated, trapped in specific places, accessible only to those nearby. Then, in the late 1960s, researchers developed a way for computers to communicate with each other across distances. What started as a military and academic project called ARPANET slowly evolved. By the 1990s, Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web, making the internet accessible to ordinary people. Suddenly, information wasn't locked in one location anymore. It flowed freely across a global network connecting billions of devices. The internet didn't just change how we communicate, it changed what's possible for humanity. A student in a remote village can access the same educational resources as someone at an elite university. Scientists collaborate in real time across continents. Movements for justice organize and spread awareness instantly. The internet has become humanity's collective memory, marketplace, and meeting place all at once. What makes the internet truly revolutionary is its fundamental design. It's decentralized, resilient, and ever-growing. No single person controls it. It represents a kind of collective human achievement where millions of contributions create something greater than any individual could build. The internet reminds us that when we connect people to each other and to knowledge, we don't just share information. We multiply human potential itself, creating possibilities that previous generations couldn't even imagine. Imagine carrying everything on your back, every sack of grain, every stone for building, every piece of firewood. Your shoulders ache, your feet blister, and moving anything heavy means gathering a group of people just to drag it across the ground. For thousands of years, this was simply how life worked. Then, around 3500 BCE in ancient Mesopotamia, someone had a thought that seemed almost too simple. What if, instead of dragging things, we let them roll? The wheel wasn't just a circle of wood. It was a complete reimagining of movement itself. By pairing a wheel with an axle, early inventors created something that could bear weight while turning freely. Suddenly, a single ox could pull what 20 people once carried. Pottery wheels let craftsmen shape clay with precision. Carts transformed trade routes, connecting distant villages into thriving networks. The wheel didn't just make work easier, it made civilization faster, more connected, and more ambitious. What's remarkable is that the wheel teaches us something unexpected about innovation. It wasn't the first idea anyone had. It required understanding rotation, balance, and friction. Sometimes, the most powerful inventions aren't the flashiest. They're the ones that quietly multiply human effort, turning struggle into possibility. For centuries, aging meant losing the world. As people's eyes weakened, text blurred into meaningless shapes, faces became indistinct. Craftsmen who relied on precision had to abandon their trades. Scholars who had spent lifetimes reading could no longer see the pages before them. Poor vision wasn't just an inconvenience. It was the end of usefulness, the beginning of dependence. There was no cure, no solution, just acceptance that the sharp world of youth would fade into permanent softness. Then, around the late 1200s in Italy, someone had a revolutionary idea. By grinding glass into curved lenses and holding them before the eyes, blurry vision could become clear again. The first eyeglasses were simple, two lenses connected by a bridge perched on the nose. But their impact was immediate and profound. Suddenly, a scholar's career didn't have to end at 50. The world snapped back into focus. Craftsmen could continue their detailed work for decades longer. Knowledge could be preserved by those who had accumulated wisdom but lost their sight. Eyeglasses extended not just vision but productive lives, keeping experienced minds engaged with the world. Reading became possible for more people across more years. What's remarkable is how eyeglasses democratize capability. They proved that human limitations weren't always permanent, that clever tools could restore what nature took away. In an age long before modern medicine, this was revolutionary. The idea that we could compensate for our body's failings. Eyeglasses remind us that some of the most important inventions don't give us new abilities. They restore what we've lost, allowing us to remain fully ourselves even as our bodies change. They teach us that innovation often means refusing to accept loss as inevitable and finding ways to keep people capable, engaged, and connected to the world they love. Before farming, humans were wanderers. We followed herds, gathered what nature provided, and moved constantly in search of food. Life was uncertain, and survival consumed every day. Then, around 4000 BCE, someone took a simple idea and changed human destiny forever. Instead of scratching at soil with sticks, they created the plow, a blade that could cut deep into earth, pulled by animals, turning hard ground into fertile fields. This wasn't just a better digging tool. It was the key to everything that came after. With the plow, one family could cultivate far more land than they needed just to survive. For the first time, humans produced surplus food. That surplus meant some people could stop farming and become craftsmen, builders, teachers, or leaders. Villages became towns, towns became cities. Writing emerged to track harvests. Governments formed to organize communities. The plow didn't just feed people. It freed humanity to specialize, to innovate, to build cultures and civilizations. Every library, every cathedral, every scientific discovery traces back to this. Farmers producing enough food that others could think, create, and dream beyond mere survival. What's profound about the plow is how it reveals the nature of transformative invention. It didn't give humans something entirely new. It amplified what we could already do, making difficult work efficient enough that we could imagine doing more than just surviving. The plow teaches us that civilization itself is built on tools that multiply human effort, freeing us to become more than we were, to reach toward possibilities we couldn't see when we were just trying to make it through another day. For early metalworkers, fire was frustratingly weak. Wood fires burned hot enough to cook food and warm homes, but not nearly hot enough to melt metals like copper, bronze, or iron. These metals held the promise of tools far superior to stone, sharper, stronger, more versatile, but they remained locked in ore because flames couldn't reach the temperatures needed to extract and shape them. Human breath could make fires hotter by blowing on them, but lungs tired quickly and couldn't sustain the intensity required. Then someone created a device so simple yet so transformative: the bellows. Two wooden boards connected by leather, with a valve that let air in but not out. Squeeze the boards together and air blasted into the fire with force no human lung could sustain. The bellows could breathe continuously, powerfully, raising fire temperatures to levels that could melt metal and transform civilization. Suddenly, the Bronze Age and later the Iron Age became possible. Blacksmiths could forge weapons, tools, and plows. Bronze bells rang from temples. Iron gates protected cities. The bellows didn't just make fire hotter, it unlocked an entire category of materials that had been theoretically useful but practically inaccessible. Every sword, every nail, every piece of agricultural equipment depended on bellows breathing life into forges. What the bellows teaches us is about amplification. Humans already had breath, but it wasn't enough. Instead of accepting that limitation, metal workers created a tool that did what lungs couldn't: deliver sustained, powerful airflow. The bellows reminds us that when our natural abilities fall short, the answer isn't always to work harder or gather more people. Sometimes it's to create tools that amplify what we can do, extending our capabilities beyond biological limits. The bellows transformed weak human breath into the mighty wind that forged civilizations, proving that intelligence and ingenuity can multiply even our most basic powers into forces that reshape the world. Ancient builders faced an impossible choice. Stone was strong and permanent, but required enormous effort to cut, move, and stack. Each block had to fit precisely with the next. Building anything large meant years of labor and extraordinary expense. Only the wealthiest societies could afford monumental architecture. Wood was easier to work with but rotted and burned. There seemed to be no material that combined strength with flexibility, permanence with practicality. Then, the Romans perfected something remarkable around 2,000 years ago: concrete. By mixing volcanic ash, lime, and water with aggregate like sand and gravel, they created a material that started as a thick liquid but hardened into stone. Concrete could be poured into any shape, molded around frameworks, and formed into structures impossible with cut stone. It was strong, durable, and revolutionarily versatile. The Romans built the Pantheon with its massive concrete dome, aqueducts that carried water across empires, and harbors that still stand beneath the sea today. After Rome fell, the recipe was lost for centuries, but when concrete returned in the modern era, it transformed civilization again. Skyscrapers reached toward clouds. Bridges spanned distances that once seemed impossible. Dams controlled rivers. Roads connected continents. Concrete became the foundation of modern infrastructure, literally the substance our cities are built upon. What concrete teaches us is the power of transformation. Romans took ordinary materials, ash, lime, rocks, and discovered that combined in the right way, they became something entirely new and far more useful. Concrete reminds us that innovation doesn't always require exotic materials or complex technology. Sometimes it requires seeing potential in the ordinary, finding the right combination that transforms the common into the extraordinary. When we learn to reshape the basic elements around us, we gain the power to reshape the world itself. For most of human history, food was a constant worry. Meat spoiled within hours in warm weather. Milk soured by afternoon. Vegetables rotted quickly. Families could only eat what they hunted, harvested, or bought that same day. Winter's cold provided brief relief, but summer meant loss and waste. Entire harvests could disappear before anyone could consume them. Communities lived at the mercy of seasons, and hunger was never far away, even in times of plenty. Then, in the early 1800s, inventors began experimenting with artificial refrigeration. By the 1920s, home refrigerators became practical. Using compressed gases and Shunhuan systems, these machines could create cold on demand, preserving food for days, then weeks. What seemed like simple cooling was actually control over time itself. The refrigerator transformed daily life in ways we barely notice now. Families could shop once a week instead of daily. Food waste plummeted. Nutrition improved because fresh food stayed fresh longer. Farmers could send produce to distant cities. Medicines that once spoiled could now save lives in remote areas. The cold chain connecting farms to tables became the invisible infrastructure of modern life. But the deeper gift of refrigeration is freedom. Freedom from constant food anxiety. Freedom to plan meals days ahead. Freedom from the exhausting cycle of daily shopping and cooking before spoilage. The refrigerator gave families back their time and their peace of mind. What this invention teaches us is that technology's greatest impact isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet and domestic. The refrigerator reminds us that innovation serving everyday needs, solving problems in kitchens and homes, can be just as revolutionary as any grand industrial machine. The best inventions don't just change what we can do, they change how we live, giving us space to think about more than mere survival. Throughout history, electricity was a curiosity, a phenomenon people observed in lightning strikes and static shocks but couldn't control or use. Scientists could generate small sparks with friction machines, but the electricity vanished instantly. There was no way to store it, no way to have electrical power when and where you needed it. Experiments were limited to brief moments when the spark appeared. The dream of harnessing electricity seemed forever out of reach because power couldn't be captured and kept. Then, in 1800, Italian physicist Alessandro Volta stacked alternating disks of zinc and copper separated by cloth soaked in salt water. He had created the first true battery, a device that could store electrical energy and release it steadily over time. For the first time in history, humans had portable, controllable electricity. Volta had essentially caught lightning and put it in a container. The battery transformed what electricity could do. Scientists could conduct longer experiments, leading to discoveries about electromagnetism and chemistry. Telegraph systems could operate reliably across continents. Eventually, batteries powered everything from flashlights to pacemakers to the laptop computers and smartphones that connect our modern world. Without batteries, our wireless, portable, mobile civilization simply couldn't exist. Every device you carry owes its independence to Volta's insight. What makes the battery so significant is what it represents about innovation, the power of storage. Generating energy is one challenge, but storing it for later use is what makes energy truly useful. The battery teaches us that sometimes the breakthrough isn't creating something new, but learning to save and preserve what we already have. Volta's invention reminds us that control over timing, over when and where we use resources, can be just as revolutionary as the resources themselves. The ability to store power is the ability to carry possibility with us wherever we go. For most of history, time was vague and unreliable. The sun rose and set, seasons changed, but the hours between were mysteries. Farmers worked from dawn to dusk without knowing exactly when noon arrived. Meetings happened around midday with everyone arriving at different times. Coordinating anything precise was nearly impossible. People lived in rhythm with nature, but they couldn't measure the moments slipping past them. Time flowed, but humans couldn't capture it or divide it into pieces they could count. Then, beginning around the 14th century in Europe, mechanical clocks emerged. Gears, weights, and pendulums working together could divide the day into hours, minutes, and eventually seconds. For the first time, humans could agree on exactly what time it was. Church bells rang at precise intervals. Markets opened at specific hours. The invisible became visible and countable. The mechanical clock changed how we think about existence itself. Factories could coordinate workers' shifts. Trains could run on schedules connecting distant cities. Science could measure experiments precisely. Navigation improved because sailors could calculate longitude using accurate timepieces. The clock didn't just tell time. It created the concept of punctuality, deadlines, and efficiency. Modern life became possible, but clocks also changed something deeper in human consciousness. We began seeing time not as an endless flow, but as a resource to be managed, saved, or wasted. Every moment became measurable and therefore valuable. The clock taught us that what we can measure, we can organize, and what we can organize, we can improve. The invention of the clock reminds us that sometimes the most powerful tools don't change the physical world. They change how we perceive reality, giving us new ways to understand and master the invisible forces that shape our lives. When we learn to measure time, we learn to use it intentionally, transforming chaos into coordination. For thousands of years, diseases swept through communities like invisible storms. Smallpox left survivors scarred and blinded when it left survivors at all. Whole families were wiped out. Epidemics could empty villages. Parents watched helplessly as children succumbed to illnesses no medicine could stop. The human body fought bravely, but against many diseases, it simply didn't know how to win. We were vulnerable to enemies our immune systems had never encountered before. Then, in 1796, Edward Jenner made a curious observation. Milkmaids who caught cowpox, a mild disease, seemed immune to deadly smallpox. Jenner deliberately infected a boy with cowpox, then exposed him to smallpox. The boy didn't get sick. Jenner had discovered vaccination, training the immune system to recognize and destroy diseases before they could take hold. The body could learn to defend itself. The impact reshaped human destiny. Smallpox, which had killed hundreds of millions, was eventually eradicated completely from Earth. Polio, which paralyzed children by the thousands, became rare. Measles, mumps, tetanus, diseases that once filled graveyards with small coffins, became preventable. Parents no longer had to wonder which of their children would survive to adulthood. Vaccines gave us something previous generations couldn't imagine: the power to stop epidemics before they started. What makes vaccines profound is the elegance of the concept. We don't fight the disease with external weapons. We teach our own bodies to become the weapon. We prepare ourselves for battles before they begin. Vaccines represent a uniquely optimistic form of medicine, the belief that we can outsmart nature by working with our own biology. They remind us that the best solutions often come from understanding how systems already work and helping them work better. Protection doesn't always mean building walls. Sometimes it means preparing wisely for what lies ahead. Text. For thousands of years, humans believed what they could see was all that existed. Diseases came from bad air or divine punishment. Life seemed to appear spontaneously from nothing. The world was mysterious because half of it was invisible to our eyes. We lived surrounded by an entire universe of tiny organisms, cells, and structures that shaped our existence, but we had no idea they were there. Our understanding of life itself was limited by the boundaries of human vision. Then, in the late 1500s, Dutch spectacle makers began experimenting with combining lenses and tubes. By the 1670s, Antony van Leeuwenhoek had refined the microscope into a tool powerful enough to see what no human had ever witnessed: tiny creatures swimming in drops of water, bacteria on teeth, blood cells flowing through capillaries. He called them animalcules. The invisible world suddenly became visible, and it was teeming with life. The microscope revolutionized our understanding of everything. Doctors discovered that diseases were caused by specific germs, leading to antiseptics and sanitation that saved millions. Scientists saw cells dividing, revealing how life grows and heals. Understanding bacteria led to antibiotics. Seeing viruses helped us develop vaccines. Every medical advance of the modern age traces back to being able to see what was once hidden. But the microscope did something even more profound. It humbled us. It revealed that we're not alone, that every surface, every drop of water, every inch of our own bodies hosts entire ecosystems we never knew existed. The microscope teaches us that reality is far richer and more complex than our senses reveal. It reminds us that the limits of what we can see aren't the limits of what exists. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from building tools that extend our perception, showing us that the universe is always larger, stranger, and more wondrous than we imagined. For all of history, humans looked up with envy. Birds soared effortlessly while we remained earthbound. Crossing an ocean meant weeks on a ship. Traveling between continents consumed months. Mountains and seas were barriers that determined where people could go and what they could achieve. Countless inventors tried and failed to fly, their machines crashing, their dreams broken. The sky seemed forever beyond reach, a realm belonging to birds and imagination, not to human ambition. Then, on December 17, 1903, two bicycle mechanics from Ohio changed everything. Wilbur and Orville Wright combined careful observation, systematic testing, and engineering brilliance. Their airplane stayed aloft for just 12 seconds and covered only 120 feet, but in that brief moment, they proved that controlled, powered flight was possible. Humans could fly. The world would never be the same. Within decades, airplanes were carrying mail, then passengers, then hundreds of people across oceans in hours instead of weeks. Distance collapsed. A businessman could attend meetings on different continents in the same week. Families separated by oceans could reunite in a day. Remote places became accessible. Global trade exploded. The airplane didn't just speed up travel. It fundamentally redrew the map of human possibility, making the entire planet feel smaller and more connected. What makes the airplane so inspiring is what it represents about human determination. We weren't designed to fly. We have no wings, no hollow bones, no instinct for the air, but we refuse to accept that limitation. The Wright brothers teach us that impossible is often just a problem we haven't solved yet. The airplane reminds us that when we combine observation, persistence, and ingenuity, we can achieve things nature never intended for us. Sometimes the greatest inventions come from refusing to accept the boundaries of what we are and insisting on becoming what we dream of being. Imagine a world where a small cut could kill you, where pneumonia was a death sentence, where mothers died from infections after childbirth and children succumbed to illnesses we now cure in days. For all of human history, bacteria were invisible assassins. Doctors could see their patients suffering, could diagnose infections, but had no weapons to fight back. Surgery was a desperate gamble. Even minor wounds could spread infection through the body, unstoppable and fatal. Then, in 1928, Alexander Fleming returned to his laboratory after vacation and noticed something strange. A mold had contaminated one of his bacterial cultures, and around that mold, the bacteria had died. That accident became penicillin, the first true antibiotic. Fleming had discovered that nature itself had created weapons against bacteria. By the 1940s, penicillin was saving soldiers on battlefields and patients in hospitals. The impact was staggering. Survival rates from infections soared. Surgeries became safer because doctors could prevent and treat infections. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia became manageable. Tuberculosis, strep throat, bacterial pneumonia, killers for thousands of years, could now be stopped with pills. Life expectancy jumped dramatically. Antibiotics didn't just cure diseases. They gave humanity confidence that we could fight back against the microscopic world trying to kill us. What makes Fleming's discovery so powerful is the role of observation and curiosity. Many scientists might have thrown away that contaminated culture in frustration. Fleming looked closer and asked why. Antibiotics teach us that groundbreaking discoveries often hide in unexpected places, waiting for someone curious enough to notice what others dismiss. Sometimes the greatest inventions come not from what we plan to find, but from paying attention to what surprises us. Imagine needing surgery, but knowing you would feel everything. The saw cutting through bone, the knife slicing flesh. Patients were strapped to tables, given alcohol or opium that barely dulled the agony. Surgeons worked as fast as possible while patients screamed. Many people chose death over the torture of surgical procedures. Speed was a surgeon's greatest skill because patients could only endure minutes of conscious suffering before shock killed them. Medicine could sometimes cure, but the path to healing was a nightmare. Then, in the 1840s, doctors began experimenting with gases like ether and chloroform. William Morton successfully demonstrated ether anesthesia in 1846 at Massachusetts General Hospital. A patient underwent surgery and felt nothing. The operating room, usually filled with screams, was silent except for the surgeon's focused work. It seemed impossible, miraculous. Pain, humanity's oldest companion, could be temporarily erased. Anesthesia revolutionized medicine overnight. Surgeons could work slowly and carefully, performing complex procedures impossible when speed was essential. Operations that once killed most patients became routine. Doctors could fix problems deep inside the body. Dental work transformed from torture to inconvenience. Childbirth, which had caused unspeakable suffering, could happen without agony. The gift wasn't just comfort, it was the ability to heal thoroughly. What anesthesia teaches us goes beyond medicine. It shows that some human experiences we consider inevitable, like pain during healing, aren't unchangeable laws of nature. They're problems waiting for solutions. Anesthesia reminds us that compassion can drive innovation just as powerfully as practical need. Sometimes the greatest inventions come from refusing to accept suffering as necessary, from believing that humanity deserves not just survival, but dignity and comfort along the way.